Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9:45, so we'll get started with this session. I would like to welcome you all for joining us on what is quite a cold and blustery morning here in London. My name is Jillian Moore. I'm the chair of the trustees here at London Sport, and it is absolutely my pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of our strategy for getting London more active over the coming months and years. Firstly, we know that this comes at an interesting, unique and quite challenging time for so many people and so many organisations right across London. The pandemic has changed everything, but the most important thing is that activity and keeping active has played a very strong part in how we continue to get through this and how we will evolve and grow and change things as the pandemic evolves and as we move forward, vaccines become available and things change. The events of the past year have also shown how strong, resilient and important London's community sport organisations are in supporting that objective and how vital they are for Londoners' lives. So today we're delighted to introduce you to the core principles of our strategy that will guide our work in the coming years and support the community sport and activity initiatives in London for years to come. Although we don't have a huge amount of time today, we're also very keen to hear your thoughts and questions about our new strategy. And I would like to invite people who are on the call to submit any questions you might have on the Q&A function as we go through this session. And at the end of this session, we will have a short Q&A where we'll try and answer them as many as we can. Or for those that we can't get to today or anything you may have afterwards, we'll be sending out more information after the call, including the link that you can contact to share your questions, and we'll do our best to respond. But first of all, by way of introduction, I'd like us to show a short film that brings our work to life. Our We Are Not Spectators video. So please run the video.
We are not spectators. We believe in an active London, a city that runs, kicks, jumps, dances, plays, and moves like no other. It's why we do what we do. It's why we work so hard to connect people and organizations, helping them develop and grow. It's why we're here for inactive, young, and isolated people. Supporting them, believing in them, funding programs, creating desire, fighting corners. And it's why we work with others to find new ways to motivate and inspire, so that every Londoner can find their thing and be part of the most diverse, creative and active city in the world. Active is what we believe. Active is what we do. We are not spectators. We are London Sport.
We are indeed London Sport, and following on from that, I'd like to introduce Mike Diaper, who joins us from London Sport, where he's on the executive team, to share more about the work that Sport England are doing. Apologies, I think I got that slightly wrong. Mike is actually part of the Sport England executive team, and he's going to share more about the work that he's doing with Sport England and how the work that we do at London Sport connects into that. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Jillian, and good morning. I'm really delighted to be with you this morning. London Sport and indeed the entire network of active partnerships across England are simply essential. Essential, yes, to Sport England, but more importantly, essential to the health, society and economic well-being of our country. The value of what London Sport does in connecting and getting Londoners active has always been immense, but they have really come into their own across the last year as together we've been battling the pandemic. So I want to start with a massive thank you to Jillian and her board and Tove and her team. I also want to thank everybody who's on the call today, their partners, for the help you offer. What I love about London Sport's new strategy, London Moving, and their mission is that its ambitions, its goals are ones I hope we all share. Simply getting London moving, because that changes lives for the better. Utilising physical activity can help all, and I really underline the word all, Londoners live happier, healthier lives. Sport England will launch its own new strategy this coming Tuesday, and you'll find exactly the same sentiments. Also, the acknowledgement that many people want to be active, but through no fault of their own, struggle to be, and that some groups need and deserve our extra support. And I know the London Sports Strategy seeks to tackle that. And of course, the realization that our ambitions will only be realized by us coming together, truly working together nationally, regionally and locally. And that goes to the heart of what London Sport is there to do. I think it is worth saying, it's not just a happy coincidence, an accident that our two strategies are being launched one after the other and that they align one to the other. Our organisations have spent a year consulting, developing our plans, co-designing, not just together, but with hundreds and hundreds of partners to ensure shared ambitions. It's really important that we grasp the moment and maximise, like never before, the potential of our combined efforts. So that's why we're deliberately and explicitly placing London Sport and the entire Active Partnerships network as a central foundation of our future strategy. Because our strategy, London Sports Strategy, will only win through working locally, not imposing a top-down view, but rather co-designing at a local level, learning, listening, doing the things communities want. And one of the ways London Sport has been helping find the way to work locally is through two of Sport England's local delivery plans, one in Hackney, one in Southall. And together, we've learned that the local community needs to be in control. And that's a key principle of our strategy, and I know the London Sports Strategy. There is no single solution, and you have to look whole system. Investment is important, but it doesn't always take huge amounts to generate momentum. And advocacy, talking, dialogue is just as important. You have to test and learn lots of things, discard some and keep others. And what works in one bit of London might not work in another. And unsurprisingly, relationships are at the utter heart of everything we have to do. The impact of COVID has exacerbated existing inequalities. It's something I really worry about day in, day out. I'm very grateful to London Sport for what they've been doing to help through our Tackling Inequalities Fund, which was created during the first lockdown last year. They're using the fund to reach out to key groups, older people, those on lower incomes, Londoners from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. I think this model of where we devolve funding and trust and allow London Sport to reach out and work locally is one we're really keen to build on in the coming years. So to conclude, a massive thank you to London Sport and all of its partners. Sport England endorses the plan and we stand ready to help drive it forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate the comments and appreciate the insight. I'd now like to invite our CEO at London Sport, Tove Okunniwa, to now present the details of our strategy. So Tove, over to you.
Thanks very much, Jillian. I'm hoping you can see me. I can't see myself, so that's probably a better way to present from my front room here. Thank you all for sparing the time to join us today. We're excited to share our new strategy with you. It's a direction that's been shaping our thinking now for over a year and an evolution from the work that we've been doing in the past that's giving us a clear purpose for the future. We want to share this thinking with you for three key reasons. One, we want to be really overt and transparent about the thinking that is driving our work. Secondly, we want you to know where our priorities lie. And thirdly, and most importantly, we want to start a conversation about how we can work together to use the power of physical activity and sport to improve lives across the capital. What you'll see today is a dynamic framework with long-term goals. It will and should evolve as we go. The ways of working are at least as important as what we do. It isn't a comprehensive work plan as yet. That's still in development and still open to ideas as to how we can best deliver against the goals that we'll talk about today. As Jillian and Mike have said, of course, all of our work has been fundamentally impacted over the last few months by the COVID pandemic and the devastating effects it's had on our city, our communities, and the physical activity and grassroots sector in all of its forms. This will continue to impact our work for some time to come. It's been a major influence on all of the work that we're doing currently and will play into the development of our operational plan for the next year and beyond. And whilst we don't reference COVID on every page of the strategy that you'll see, do know that it is playing a fundamental part in every aspect of our thinking at present. So the slide in front of you gives an overview of what is coming up today. And without any further ado, I will press on. Next slide, please. So why is helping people to be active still so important? Next slide, please. We all believe that physical activity and sport has got the ability to change lives for the better. And there is proven evidence to support what we know and see for ourselves all the time. In the previous Sport England strategy and the DCMS government sports strategy, the outcomes outlined on this slide, mental well-being, physical well-being, social and community integration, economic development and individual development, were the outcomes that we were all striving for. And these very wide-ranging social impacts are still what drives us as an organisation. Importantly, we know and care passionately about these as final outcomes, but we as an organisation are what we're describing as outcome agnostic. We haven't picked one of these particular outcomes that we're focusing on specifically. We are working with partners that have ambitions to change people's lives for the better in all of these areas. We work with partners to bring the benefits in any and all of these areas. The common denominator is that our expertise is in getting people active in sport and physical activity, where that leads and the social good that takes and brings to our participants will vary, but we are equally keen that our value is seen in all of those areas. Next slide, please. We also know that there's a tangible monetary value to activity. Our social return on investment research revealed a total value of £8.75 billion, value that's delivered by the current levels of physical activity. That's stuff that's happening now. That's 500 million attributed to physical well-being, 3 billion to mental well-being, 160 million to individual well-being, and £5 billion on social and community well-being. In short, it's a good investment, a return of £1.48 for every £1 invested. Next slide, please. So therefore, our mission as an organisation remains the same: to make London the most active city in the world, a big ambitious goal. It will be familiar to many of you. It's a mission that we've had for several years now, and we feel that it defines us clearly as an organisation. That's what we are here to do. It underpins everything we do, and importantly, it's not done yet. It's also something that we can, should, we can't, we don't want to do alone. We want to create a movement across the capital of partners, organisations and individuals who share our vision and want to work together to achieve it. Next slide, please. So how will we work going forward? As I said at the beginning, this is at least as important as what we do, and will drive the effectiveness of the work that we do as an organisation. It's our approach to how we work, and importantly, how we will partner. Next slide, please. So we'll be purposeful and proactive, clear on what we want to achieve, and proactive in delivering the most effective ways of getting there. We'll be collaborative and supportive. This is core to who we are as an organisation, and this won't change. We want to work in genuine partnership and see all of the organisations that we partner with thrive and achieve their goals, as well as the joint goals that we set for our joint projects. We'll be results driven. We want to see tangible results and the impact of our work. Over time, we want to see population level change, and we want to learn from not only what has worked, but just as importantly, what hasn't worked in the things that we've tried. Next slide, please. Nothing about us without us. This is our shorthand for all of the work that we do in place-based working. To work creatively with communities, to develop programs and opportunities that they want, sustainable provision that serves their needs for the long term. System-wide change. We know that long-term change on the scale that we want will be systemic, and we will work towards that change in all parts of the system of our fantastic city. And finally, we will be inclusive. It's absolutely central to our approach in driving down inequality in the opportunity for people to lead active lives. We want to ensure that all of the activity that we're involved in is as accessible as possible. And we want to continue the great work and focus that we've have a track record of having put into being fully inclusive to those with disability, as well as extending that focus to other groups of people who are often excluded from physical activity and sport, or find it more difficult to access, to ensure that we're genuinely inclusive of all people and communities in London. I'd like to show a short video now, a personal reflection from Yasmin from the fantastic Muslima Sports Association. If you'll excuse some of the quality of the video that we're showing today, this is one of the challenges in everybody recording video at home and not necessarily with production level equipment, but the content is absolutely fantastic, and we wanted to share that with you anyway. So maybe you could run the video. Thank you.
My journey started like most, I imagine. From a very early age, I was influenced by my older brothers, and football became my first love. But the love of football led to the love of many other sports, and I loved participating in school, and I started competing and representing my school at county level. However, as I got older, I became more aware of the challenges I was facing as a young Muslim woman. Sports didn't have people that looked like me, so I felt it was inaccessible for someone who wore the hijab and who didn't want to wear shorts to play football or netball skirt to play netball. It often felt like another world which couldn't be entered by people who looked like me. And although I played sports and even competed in the Newham Under-16s League, I eventually stopped playing as soon as I left school. And the reason I stopped playing was because of what I previously mentioned. It felt worlds apart from where I was from, but also the clubs I looked at joining were dominated by women who didn't look like me either. I didn't want to compromise my cultural beliefs to conform to the club culture, so I had to make the hard decision not to take sports any further. I still passionately followed sports, and by 2008, I really started to miss playing and explore the options available to me. Unfortunately though, as a Muslim woman, the options were still very limited. The women-only options were not strictly women-only environments, as venues had galleries or male coaches who men could just walk through at any time. So when the opportunity arose to start my own sessions to improve prospects for Muslim women to play sports, I knew it was something I needed to do because I missed it so much, and I wanted to give not only other women an opportunity to play team sports, but also create a culture within our community which normalized women and girls playing sports.
Fantastic, thank you. So our goals, what are the 6 areas that we really want to impact over the coming years? The strategy is made up of these 6 long-term goals, which if we achieve them will make a fundamental difference to physical activity in London and to London itself. They won't be easy to achieve and they will take time. We definitely can't achieve them alone. I know I'm repeating myself on that, but it's so important that we get that across to you. But they will be game changing, and they are where we as an organisation will put our focus. Next slide, please. And one more. So at the heart of our strategy are our first 2 goals. The first one is to increase the levels of activity amongst adults who are not at the moment getting the 150 minutes of moderate activity each week that's recommended by the chief medical officer. At the moment, that's 35.5% of Londoners. At the same time, we'll have a particular focus on those people who are inactive, who aren't doing even 30 minutes of exercise a week, and sometimes very much less. At the moment, that's nearly 24% of the population of London. And thirdly, important to us is to reduce the inequalities that persist in people having the opportunity to become active, as we talked about before. Disabled people, people from some ethnically diverse communities, but not everybody, women and girls, and those who are less well off all have a harder time living active lives. Some of the first things that we've identified that we will focus on as London Sport, working in communities, in place-based projects that will help those people to create and access a provision that they want and best fits their needs. It's not a quick process, but a long-term systemic approach that's showing great results in many areas of the country, including the 2 local delivery pilots in London. Working to shape the use of formal and informal spaces and places to ensure that people have got enough space to be able to be active, and identifying places that might not necessarily already be being used for activity. Another layer in a place-based project work. Making sure that we're sharing our learning and supporting and empowering a wider partner network to learn from best practice and achieve some tangible outcomes. And finally, working in partnership focused on achieving specific social outcomes where we know that sport and physical activity can make a real difference. So, for example, we've recently formed a partnership with the Alliance of Sport in Criminal Justice to support young people at risk of offending in Lambeth, Lewisham and Croydon, amongst many other projects. Next slide, please. Our second goal is to give all young Londoners the best opportunity to form a positive physical activity and a habit for life. It stands to reason if we want London to be the most active city in the world, it's essential that the next generation of Londoners are more active than those who have gone before them. At present, there are 58% of our young Londoners who are not achieving the recommended levels for young people, which is 60 minutes a day. It's a high target, but that is what the Chief Medical Officer advises in terms of a healthy level of exercise. And we do have 34% of young Londoners who are inactive, i.e. achieving less than that 30 minutes. We want everybody in this group to enjoy a more positive relationship with physical activity. If they enjoy it, they'll feel the benefit and they'll have a habit that will see them through every stage of their lives. We want to give young people and children a better experience and have the opportunity to form a habit for the rest of their lives, but also just to find their thing. So the 4 areas here that we've identified are around giving young people more and different opportunities so that they can find the thing that really inspires them and that they really enjoy. To identify more safe places for them to get active in, just like for adults. We're working with London Youth at the moment on a project to open up schools. So we've had 16 schools have opened up their facilities outside of the school hours. We want to use our influence to improve local systems to facilitate all of the work that we do with young Londoners. And we want to develop more of those brilliant active leaders that we know are so instrumental in making an enjoyable and positive experience for young people. Next slide, please. So our 3rd goal is to improve policy systems and investment by influencing change in the key areas which will facilitate active lives. We know that changing the system is the only way to achieve sustainable improvement. So we'll work to use our influence to make those changes that will have the most positive impact on people's ability to lead active lives. First of all, we need evidence, whether that's our own research or that supports our aims. We'll develop and gather credible and robust research to support prioritising physical activity. We'll lead new thinking and find and share the learning and best practice so we can add real value to those who are making the decisions in our city. And most importantly of all, we'll work in partnership with those people who make the decisions on local projects to demonstrate the value of physical activity and collaborate with them to make the changes to policy and investment that will make a real difference on the ground. We'll continue to use our voice to advocate for physical activity as a powerful way to achieve social outcomes and improve the lives of Londoners. Next slide, please. So our 4th goal is to use tech, data and digital communications to their fullest potential to support and motivate Londoners to become and stay active. We've seen and long understood the huge potential of tech and data to our mission of getting Londoners more active. And through the pandemic, we've seen so many opportunities of this really coming into its own, whilst acknowledging the gap that the use of tech can often exacerbate with people who don't have the access. So we've had some really successful projects in this area. Our Sport Tech Hub and our recent project in partnerships with our parks and Sport England, using the social media platforms to engage with people directly. We'll hear a little bit about that later on. So we will keep pressing forward, supporting the development of tech solutions that support active lives. We'll keep scaling our use of digital communications, harnessing the power to support and motivate people to get and stay active. We want to continue to connect our traditional partners with the tech and digital solutions that can support their own objectives and accelerate the work that they're doing in the real world. And also to use the wealth of available data to help develop better interventions to help people out of inactivity. Next slide, please. So our 5th goal is around innovation, leading the way to bring organisations together to not only create, but also develop, test, champion and scale innovative ways of supporting active lives. Innovation for London Sport is absolutely part of our DNA, not just in the tech world, but in every area of what we do. Finding new or better ways of doing things is what really drives us all. We want to be more systematic in our approach of creating, developing and scaling these innovative solutions. We also want to be a really effective catalyst to collaboration and creativity for our network and partners, bringing the right people together and seeing the spark that bringing diverse groups of teams of people from different backgrounds together and see where that can take everyone. For our own staff, we're going to give them the skills to feel confident of their own creative skills and their ability to facilitate the creative process for all our partners and network. Next slide, please. And finally, our sixth goal is about ensuring that evidence, data and high quality insight informs the development of policy and practice to support active lives. Basing our work on this high quality insight and robust research is crucial to creating impact. We want to give the widest access to the best research and insight to our partners across London, so they have the same benefit as we do in devising and gathering together that research. And also to enable us to advocate for physical activity in sport with the most compelling evidence available. Next slide. So how this all fits together is as you see in front of you. Getting less active adults and creating a positive habit for our children and young people sit very firmly at the centre of our strategy, the key goals of what we want to achieve. The other four goals are the areas of work that we know are most influential in making those centre aims achievable, using policy and influence, tech and data, research and insight and innovation to make sure that we have the best possible initiatives to drive the increase in physical activity amongst adults and young people. Next slide, please. So who are we targeting? Next slide, please. We're focusing on inactive and less active Londoners, that 35% that I was talking about earlier on, of adults. Often when we talk about this group, we talk about them and define them by demographics. But we also wanted to find a way that makes it easier for people to understand the attitudes, the motivations, the drivers and barriers that these people are facing to getting more active. And we want people to understand and to be able to walk in the shoes of some of our less active Londoners more easily. So to that end, we've developed a segmentation that many of you will have seen already that breaks the group down into 7 key attitudinal segments. It was based on a really robust research study and a huge amount of data that we ran a couple of years ago. We won't go into that now, but if anybody is really interested in getting into the nitty-gritty of that data and understanding these groups in more detail, do please let us know, and we'd be more than happy to set up a session where we can take you through all of that. This has been really instrumental for us. We know that COVID may well have had different impacts on these groups. So over the next year, we're going to revisit and see what impacts and what changes have happened within these groups of our 7 segments. But this has been a really key way of looking at less active Londoners and getting under their skin and into the lives that they lead to better help them to become active. Next slide, please. We have a similar study, the 6 youth personalities that were developed by Sport England a number of years ago, along the same lines and given the same ethos behind understanding people a little bit more than moving beyond the demographics. I understand that we're likely to see an update to this very soon as well, so we look forward to that. But in short, the people that we are targeting are the less active and the inactive people of our city. Next slide, please. So how are we going to learn from our work in a continual basis and measure our impact? Next slide, please. We've been strengthening our approach to measuring the impact of the work that we do in monitoring the progress of each of our 6 goals, and on a project-by-project basis too. We've recently started working with a specialist measurement and evaluation agency called InFocus that will help us to get this right and improve our skill and confidence across the whole of the organisation. And hopefully, again, that will be skill and insight that we can pass on to our partners. We see our impact measurement in 4 key areas, as reflected on this graphic here. So we want to be able to clearly monitor the progress towards our strategic goals. We want a practical aid to our decision making. So something that is going to inform in a robust way what we do more of, what we do less of, and what we stop doing altogether. A means of improving our learning and how we might evolve and change projects and work streams to make them better as we go, so that we evolve and continually learn and improve. And then finally, to provide robust data that might be useful to other organisations and people working elsewhere within the system. Passing on the learning and sharing effectively is another way that we can really increase our impact. Next slide, please. In addition to the 6 goals and our learning approach, we also have a way of evolving our own organisation in culture that will enable us to better deliver against the external facing impact that we want to create. These are internal priorities for us as an organisation that will enable us to be more sustainable as an organisation, and we hope improve our impact and performance as an organisation. Next slide, please. The first of these we've noted as becoming more like London. We believe it's absolutely essential that our staff reflect the city that we serve. To increase our diversity, most urgently our ethnic diversity, is a key goal for us. It'll make us stronger as an organisation, allowing us to have access to all of the talent in our great city. It will make us more creative and innovative. And crucially, it will help us to engage more effectively with all of the communities and people in London to gain a greater understanding of the people that we want to work with and help to get active. As an organisation, this is absolutely the right thing to do. We're a proud anti-racist organisation that stands against all kinds of inequality in all of its forms wherever we see it. To put a little bit of colour onto this, we've asked Joseph Baines, who's one of our employees here at London Sport, to give his take, which is really compelling on why inclusion is so important to us. If you could run the video, please.
Society cannot make the change for organisations. It must start from within the organisation and also on an individual level. To become more inclusive, we must first understand ourselves better at all levels of the organisation. And this will affect everything we do, from allocating funding, making decisions, influencing policymakers, and designing new programs that make an impact to society. On a personal level, and I'm not speaking for London Sport, I feel the sports sector has not yet grasped the concept of inclusion, and diverse groups of people, they still face barriers. It feels that there's no real connection between society and organisations. It's like that they're operating as two separate entities. We need to make organisations become more permeable to society to make diversity and inclusion possible. The potential reason for this is the general nervousness of not experiencing something before and not being brave enough to take risks to fail. Over the next 1 years, I hope that more consideration will be given to recruiting diverse groups of people in coaching, management, senior leadership roles, not out of tokenism, but through a fair and objective recruitment process. Also, to see more diverse groups of people participating in exercise without facing barriers because of the better designed activity programs, greater awareness of inclusion, and more funding. I'm hoping that London Sport's new strategy will help to influence and change the sports sector's way of thinking and encourage people to become more empathetic to others to drive inclusion.
Thank you. So part of this for us as an organisation is a cultural evolution. So the culture that drives the organisation has definitely been evolving too. We feel that we absolutely have to change in order to deliver the 6 very big, ambitious goals that we've outlined earlier on. So the key areas of change for us are outlined on this slide here, changing from a traditional hierarchy into something that's a little bit more agile, project way of working and a matrix system across the organisation. Moving from a position where the relationship was sometimes seen as the end result of the work that we were doing, whereas now we're seeing our relationships as super important, but as the means to an end of achieving outcomes and impact within the communities that we're working. And shifting from individual priorities within the organisation, where sometimes individual people would feel very passionately about particular projects, to a point where we've actually got fewer organisational priorities, but they are backed by much more of the organisation, and therefore we have more resource to make the impact within those key areas. Next slide, please. We have 3 key areas for us as an organisation which we think are really important to our sustainability and our performance, and therefore the impact that we can make going forward. We want to diversify our income streams, making us more sustainable in the future, particularly as public funds are likely to be very tight as we recover from the pandemic. We want broader range of income to secure us as an organisation. Organisational excellence to continue to be a sound, well-run, well-governed organisation that is continually improving and making more of a difference. And finally, we want to be the best place to work for all of our own staff, making sure that we attract and retain really talented and committed people who will develop and thrive for themselves at London Sport. Next slide, please. As I've said innumerable times this morning, we can't, we shouldn't, and we don't want to do this alone. We have a phenomenal network of partners, and we want to work even more effectively and specifically with partners to make more of a difference. If there are areas where you think that we can do that, we can't wait to hear from you. And we're going to show you a little bit of the view of one of our current partners, Bjorn from our parks, who we've worked with very closely over the past months, and his view of working in partnership and how that has worked.
Hi guys, my name is Bjorn Barakor. I'm the CEO and founder of an organisation called Our Parks. We deliver free online and outdoor exercise classes targeting inactivity across diverse communities in London and now the UK.
Thanks, Bjorn. I'm Chris Norfield. I am our digital behaviour change lead at London Sport. And over the past year, we've been working together with Our Parks and Sport England on a project to help people be active at home, particularly during the COVID-19 lockdown. Yeah, I think that was one of the things for me when we started to look at what the at-home offer could be. Sport England had commissioned some research into those target audiences of ethnically diverse communities and socioeconomic groups to try and understand what they might need from an at-home offer. But I think for me, it was really then when we started to work with Our Parks that we had an understanding of how you could translate that into an at-home fitness program. And I think for me, what do you think were the real kind of successes in terms of us working together as a partnership around that? So having Sport England as a funder, Our Parks as a deliverer of that program, and you were creating something, and London Sport working in terms of marketing.
Yeah, I mean, so the reason why the partnership works so well because we share a mutual concern and direction to solve and try and make fitness inclusive for everyone. So all three parties are trying to solve the same problem. So we already was bought into a solution or an offering that wasn't like anything else that's out there. And then for us, partnership working, and I think anyone's watching this, it's so important. And I think lots of organizations, entrepreneurs, when you see where, say, take a superstar, for instance, we're in a nature of we see people and we see things happening, but we don't understand the reason why we see this player of the year or the success of all these people. There's teams behind them that give them the ability to gravitate to the masses and to do the job that they're trying to get done. So we know this, and I can't even share enough how much just sitting with yourself, Claire, and everyone from London Sport England on our weekly calls, and we have a way in which we can see through a lens which is slightly different from your lens and slightly different from Sport England's lens. And suddenly we sit on a table, say, this is where we want to get to. This is where we really know it will make a massive impact. And suddenly the ideas started to flow. Suddenly we started to develop a program that, in my eyes, was developed so quickly as well. So anyone that's watching, we shot 27 videos over a weekend. So we did it. It was very quick in terms of, but all the way through that process of developing, we were having conversations as a team, saying, this is where we want to go. We draw on each other's expertise, and the finished product, it's now showing that when you work as a team, you achieve greater things. And when you really value the people within your quartet or your team, and you have different strengths, it only is going to strengthen the way in which the product, the service you're trying to deliver will be seen out there.
So far, we're on something nearly 100,000 people signed up for Couch to Fitness. Is that right? Yeah,
100,000 people, 97% females with senior ages of 25 and 45, and actually probably higher than that now, between age 25 and 60, I'd say. Really targeting the BAME. So it was to target ethnic diverse community. That was one of our objectives, and it was to target those that have been I say exercised out of the offering that was happening in that time. When I say exercised out, I mean the attainment level to even do some of the programs wasn't on the radar, and they didn't have the motivation or the confidence to do that. And then we created a community. So, and it was you really who pushed the Facebook group and the community. And again, that comes from us having continuous discussions and debates around what do we think is going to work. And that part would have never happened, let's say. So there's lots of stuff that would have never happened if, say, I and my team went off and did Couch to Fitness by ourselves, if London Sports did it, or if Sport England did it. So that co-design is so important. And then now the impact we're seeing with those 100,000, or it'll be 100,000 in about a day or so. So we're almost there. So by the time you hear this, it's 100,000. That's why we're using that number. There's 100,000 Parkers. And what we're hearing back from them is, honestly, it's one of those pieces of work where I think you're more proud of a piece of work when you do it as a collaboration than you are if you did it by yourself, because the rigor and the way in which we had to come together to share each other's ideas and respect each other's ideas enough to implement them is amazing.
Great, thank you. So that's it in a nutshell. A quick canter through the headlines. I'm now going to pass back to Jillian for the Q&A.
Many thanks, Tove. And hopefully everyone has taken from that as per the video we had earlier, we are indeed not spectators. There is many things that we can do. There's many things that we want to do. There's a fantastic strategy that we are already starting to act upon, and that I think we as an organisation we believe will drive massive results and massive changes over the months and the years to come. Pandemic or non-pandemic, there's many things that we can do. So I'd now like to move on to Q&A. I know there's been a number of prompts throughout Tove's presentation for people to submit questions. Please continue to do so if you have any that are outstanding that we can address in the next sort of 15 minutes or so. I'd like to introduce, as well as Tove, a couple more members of our leadership team at London Sport. So Tim Copley, who's our Director of Insights, Technology and Data, and Mark Foster, who's our Director of Operations. And hopefully between the three of the team, we should be able to get most of these questions answered. So for those of you who've been submitting questions, I know a couple of them have already been answered if you move to the answered tab on the Q&A. So I'm going to propose that we move through the open questions to start with. And I'm going to start with the first question from Chris Poynton, which says, which city is currently the most active in the world and what is the gap? Tove, a good one for you to start with, I think.
A great one for me to start with. It's a pretty difficult thing to measure, to be honest. It's something that we are working with an organisation called Active Citizens Worldwide, which is an amalgamation, a collaboration between a number of cities across the world, and we're working with them to really assess where we can all learn from each other. Is there a measure at the moment of every single city in the world and a league table? Sadly not. But what we are starting to do is, through that mechanism, put some key measures in place that we can start to compare our progress as cities towards that most active. It's a tricky thing to define in absolute terms, but we can definitely see the progress that each of those cities is making.
Many thanks, Tove. So moving on to the next question from Nigel Burton. How are you planning to reach those people who don't have access to tech equipment? I think that might be a good one to share with Tim, given technology aspects. Tim, what's your view on that question?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I think first off, I think we are really conscious of the digital divide and our awareness of using tech and digital, and being really kind of mindful of not increasing inequality accidentally, if you like. So it's about using tech and digital at the right time and what's appropriate. So, for example, I think earlier this week, we had a kind of planning conversation around what we're going to do around COVID. And for a practical example would be using activity cards for young people, perhaps, who don't have access to equipment. So I guess we use link to the principle of co-production. If we are really engaging with our constituents or the people we want to work with, we should hopefully be understanding their needs and their ability and access to technology a bit more perhaps than we have been before. I think the other bit I would say is around the use of technology is not always just simply targeted at the end user. It's supporting infrastructure agencies like social prescription organizations to use tech, data and digital approaches perhaps to support the referral process into activities. So it's kind of multi-layered, but absolutely we are very sort of aware and working with a number of local authorities actually on their sort of digital plans, and they themselves have sort of digital divide, I guess, considerations, if that's the right term, to work through, and we're working with them on that.
Great, many thanks.
Jillian, I think it's worth saying also that the vast majority of work that is happening across the operations department, our place-based working, etc., is about being out on the ground and working in communities. So the work that we do in tech is really important, and as Tim says, we're working to make sure that that is as accessible as possible, but it doesn't impact all of our work by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of work that we're doing on the ground in real world in communities.
Thank you.
Yeah, do you want me to just say a bit more on that, Tove? Because I think, yeah, we're doing quite a lot of work in that space, and Tim's right, we've caught up this week on some of the issues that we have to grapple with here, because it's, for example, we worked closely with Disability Sports Coach on developing packs to get to people who are shielding and who are disabled people. But we're also now thinking how we can use tech to then get to the next stage of how tech can be used to apply to that piece of learning. So that's really strong. I think the other aspect is that tech of itself is a tool, so we need to be working very closely with communities. So we're looking to work through using the Tackling Inequalities Fund with provide youth centres, etc., to get tech in situ for people who haven't got access, who haven't got the space or the ability to use it themselves, to both for access to activities, but also for other tools and other uses too. So we've been working very closely with a range of community groups through the Tackling Inequalities Fund that's funding that's really helped us to kind of get into communities around how we can apply tech and use tech for communities where there isn't that access. The other aspect of that is that how we ensure that the tech is available to people. So we're looking at how we can get capital funding to pilot projects in that space too. And there are connections through our boards too, as Jillian well knows, where we'll be able to access the use of hardware where that's appropriate to be used in communities too.
Thank you, Mark. And yes, as you referenced, and as all three of you know, technology is particularly dear to my heart, given my background and my world, and I'm glad that we're able to do so much, and we can do more in terms of the role that technology can play in driving this strategy and delivering on it, and how it can help. Okay, let's move on to the next question then. So from Arjit Ravi, as you talk about inclusion, is that strategies and policy supporting transgenders? Perhaps Tove, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think the way that we're thinking about inclusion is thinking about all groups that are having a tougher time and working out how all of the work that we can do is as accessible as it can possibly be. But yes, absolutely, targeting specific groups with specific solutions going forward is something that is on our agenda. At the moment, we're working to finalise our operational plan for the year. So all of the initiatives and the actual programs, etc., of where we're going to put our own resources is being developed at the moment. If there are particular needs within that community that the person who's asked this question would like to raise with us, then I'd suggest them getting in touch with us outside of this, and we can see where that crosses over with any of the work that we've either got planned, or if there are specific opportunities to collaborate that would address that particular community.
Thank you, Tove. Next, there's a couple of questions that I'll combine around, I think, the personalities of young children and families and so on. So we have a question from Cara Mills-Haunch, which says, are there plans to create the personalities of young children and their families too? Or do you see them fitting into the adult personalities due to that important influence? Also, are there plans to continue to support co-curricular programs in schools, as this is often a key community opportunity to influence and support children? And we also have a question from Caroline McRoyal asking, have we defined an age range for young people as mentioned in the strategy? So perhaps we could take those two together. Tim, would you like to start from an insights point of view? Although I'm sure Tove has a view, because I know personas are incredibly dear to her heart, but let's start with you, Tim.
Yeah, no, Sport England have produced something relatively similar in terms of personalities, called youth personalities. So we're currently using that as our sort of basis for understanding and reaching young people. So we don't currently have specific plans to do a sort of replicate the study we did with the adult population. But that said, you know, if we felt there was value and added benefit, you know, to do further research around young people, that certainly we'd be open to. And in fact, we've got plans to put out an open call to all our partners to ask what your insight or research priorities are, so that we ourselves want to create and undertake research that obviously supports our strategy, but also naturally answers questions that our stakeholders have as well. So watch out for that. That's coming. But yeah, in the meantime, we'll be using the youth personalities research from Sport England as our basis for young people.
Thank you, Tim. I don't know, Tove, if there's anything you do want to add, or whether Tim encapsulated it perfectly.
I think he's got it there. And I think for the second part of that question, Mark's probably best placed to talk about the work that we're doing with young people and how we're defining young people.
Yeah, thanks, Tove. Yes, to answer the question bluntly, yes, we're expanding the age range, so it's 0 to 19. Our focus, particularly what we're conscious of, is that we need to work more in the early years space. What we want to do, particularly for children and young people with that habit for life, is the awareness that you have to work with families, but also that you have to work in an early intervention way, so you need to get in early. So for us, the key challenges, and this is where we're going to need partners, is to really start working with families where young people who are particularly at risk of not developing habits for life in terms of physical activity and sport. And that goes back to very much the comments that Tove was talking about in terms of the quality of access. So we're really conscious of the need to do that. And it's kind of part of my passion, actually, because part of my background, I used to do a lot of this work in a previous role. So we want to expand, but we're aware that we need to work in collaboration to be able to achieve the best outcomes and identify the right projects. So if anybody's got any ideas on that, please do shout and let me know.
I think that's perhaps a good lead into the next question, Mark, so be prepared. I might come back to you straight away. We have a question from Dan Wells around system change forms the basis of a number of new and evolving strategies around health and physical activity. What does successful systems change look like for London Sport? But also, how can partners support this approach, and what do you need from us? I don't know, Mark, if you want to start with that, and then we can ask the rest of the group.
Yeah, I might call on Tim on this because he's good on this stuff too. So what I'll talk about here is, I think for us, system change and what we've been looking at through the development of this strategy, and we are looking at kind of our own theory of change in this space and how we can get the right layering in our work with partners, is to think very clearly about what we're leaving behind and who we're working with within communities and what our focus is within that system. So we've been through a process of identifying, understanding our existing work and where that fits within the system, and then thinking about some of the kind of key strategic but also community partners that we need in order to get that change that we've identified. So I think it's very much a co-production approach, but we have clear ideas about what we can bring to that system, and then what we're leaving behind within that system that are identified with our partners. So we're very much at the start of that journey in that sense, we will need partners to identify if we're at the correct point of each system that we want to get the change for physical activity in sport, if that makes sense. But Tim, you might have something else to add to that too, about the work that we're doing at the moment about the whole system.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add really is that from my slightly personal view maybe, but it's for in any locality, it's easier for an individual to be active. So, you know, different levels of the system, be it access to facilities, those people, those influential relationships, societal norms, etc., are more conducive to enabling active lives, and that physical activity opportunities work to improve outcomes for the locality. So I guess that's where my sort of head goes with it.
And I think, you know, to the point of the question of what can partners do to help, I think particularly partners who are in the decision-making space, who might need support, crave input, research, all of the things that will make it easier for them to make decisions that will have that impact that Tim has just talked about, to contact us and to have the conversations with us, so that we can identify where our resource and our impact can be greatest within the local areas that they have got jurisdiction over.
Thank you. We are getting close to time, so we probably only have time for a couple more questions. So apologies for those we've not got to yet, but we will make sure that written answers are provided to all of them. Perhaps if I just skip ahead to a very relevant current question from Paul YM, which is, currently park open spaces are being overwhelmed by people trying to access a place to improve their health and well-being. So we have a real audience after this pandemic. How do we tap into these people once we come out of lockdown? And more broadly, I guess, what is your view on how we can make the most of this focus that people have during pandemic and lockdown on exercise and activity and carry that forwards? Tove, if you want to pick that one up.
I can kick off with that. I think there are concentrated areas of people coming together to exercise at the moment, obviously because of the situation that we find ourselves in. I think we have to be really robust in our analysis of what is happening there, because anecdotally it feels like we are seeing, you know, people gathering together in these open spaces, but what the numbers are telling us is that activity levels are decreasing. A lot of those people who are coming together in the open spaces to walk and predominantly walk and cycle are being I suppose driven out of other types of activity that aren't allowable in lockdown. So I think we have to be really clear about understanding what we're seeing in front of us and accessing those people and parts of the system to provide the relevant types of activity and space for them post the pandemic, so that we can take them into the most appropriate types of exercise rather than just what they've had to do during this time. Sadly, we haven't seen the numbers of people who are being active increase. It's going in the other direction. So I think in giving people support to continue with the good stuff that is happening through the digital space, but also to give people support to go back to their preferred ways of exercise and physical activity that they haven't been able to do through the pandemic. Tim?
I think there's a whole other webinar discussion to be had just on that point alone, what happens next. So I just want to end now with the killer question then, to wrap up, which I'll bring to all of you. So JD asks, out of your 6 key goals, which do you consider the most challenging to deliver and why? So let's start with Tim. What's your answer to that?
I guess it has to be either goal 1 or 2, because they are fundamentally about behaviour change within young people and old people respectively, older people respectively. So yeah, that's the big challenge is reducing inequalities within the participation behaviours as well is a big challenge, but obviously one we're massively up for. But yeah, those two would be my response.
Thank you. Mark, your views?
Yeah, thanks, Jillian. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of linked to Tim's really, I think, and it's kind of reflects on some of the questions, and Tove's answer there is I think that challenge that I think about a lot, which is that disproportionate impact of COVID on particular groups and communities, and how we can work in that space to really help them drive that and make sure that the gap doesn't get wider, but also try and deal with some of them long-standing issues at the same time, I think. And that kind of early prevention approach to doing that is a challenge, but I think we've really got to grapple with that. And to do that properly, we need to have effective partners across outside of the sport and physical activity sector. Otherwise, we won't get to those audiences effectively. So that would be my key challenge for us within that strategy.
Many thanks, Mark. And finally, just to wrap up, Tove, quickly, what's your biggest challenge? What do you see as the biggest one to achieve?
I think it's an element both within goal number 1 and number 2. It is about the inactivity in both adults and children, and changing both the system around people to give people who are inactive a better opportunity to access the physical activity that is most relevant and most enjoyable for them, but also to give them the confidence and the support from within the system to keep their motivation up to make that change. And that's basically what everything that we are doing is coming at those two challenges from all sorts of different areas. So to give people both the opportunity and the motivation to make the change and to stick with it.
Right. Many thanks, Tove. So thank you to all three of you for answering those questions. As I mentioned, I know we didn't get to all of the ones that were raised, but the team will make sure that we do get answers to all of those. And if you have any further questions, we will be sending out a link to the recording of this session to everybody straight afterwards, which will also include information for how you can submit more questions. And sometime over the next week, we will be providing a published version of our strategy that everybody can take a look at and look at more deeply. And again, raise any questions after that you may have. It's been a good session. I hope it's been informative and useful for everyone who's attended. We know that the challenges today around the current situation and COVID can make it very difficult to look ahead, and that there's a lot of uncertainty out there and a lot of difficulty for people as well. But we do believe that this is the right time to think about what happens, not just now, but as we move forwards and as things change and evolve, and hopefully our strategy reflects that. We're very grateful for all of the support we get from all of the partnerships that we've enjoyed since London Sport launched, and we absolutely look forward to continuing and building on that work in the coming years. It's great to see a large number of you in attendance, and hopefully you've picked up a little of how we can work with you and how you can help us as we move forward as well. I'd like to say a particular thank you to everyone who's been involved in today's session. So to Mike Diper from Sport England, Yasmin Harun of Muslima Sports Association, and Bon Baraka of Our Parks for allowing us to feature them, and also to Tove, Mark and Tim for answering questions. And also a thank you to everybody who's been involved in putting the session together, the team at London Sport and everyone who's supported that to get us to this point. So further than that, thank you very much once again for attending. Please do follow up and listen to the recording. And we at London Sport look forward to working with all of you over the coming months and years to make this strategy a reality. Thank you very much.